Hey everyone, welcome back. You know how we love to take these deep dives into fascinating books, and today is no exception. We're exploring Don't Believe Everything You Think by Joseph Nguyen. Have you heard of it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really thought-provoking read. And the title itself is so intriguing, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you stop and think right off the bat, like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, what if I am believing things I shouldn't be?
Right, and that's exactly what Nguyen dives into, the whole idea that our thoughts can often be the root of our suffering.
Okay, so right away, we're getting into some deep stuff, but before we get too far, I think it's helpful to set the stage for our listeners.
Yeah.
Give them a little taste of what this book is all about.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, Nguyen's book is a guide to understanding how our minds work, and how by understanding our minds, we can actually alleviate suffering and create a more fulfilling life.
Sounds promising, especially in today's world where it feels like everyone's stressed and overwhelmed. But you know what always strikes me? You can be in the most beautiful setting, on vacation, surrounded by loved ones, and still, that little voice in your head can find something to worry about.
Exactly. And that's one of Nguyen's key points. Our reactions to events, which are often fueled by our thoughts, can cause more suffering than the events themselves.
So it's not necessarily the external circumstances that are the problem, but our internal response to them.
Exactly. He uses this really powerful example in the book to illustrate this. Imagine you absolutely hate your job, but then even at home, when you should be relaxing, you find yourself getting all worked up just thinking about it.
Ugh, I think we've all been there at some point. It's like you're experiencing the misery twice, once at work, and then again in your own head.
Exactly. And that highlights that the suffering isn't really coming from the job itself in those moments, but from the thoughts about the job. And to be clear, Nguyen clarifies that he's primarily addressing psychological and emotional distress, not physical pain.
So it's about that mental and emotional anguish we create for ourselves even when we don't need to.
Exactly. And to help us understand how this works, he delves into the distinction between thoughts and thinking, which is really at the core of his whole approach.
Okay, so thoughts versus thinking. I'm curious to hear how he breaks that down.
Well, think of it like this. Thoughts are like the raw material of our minds. They just kind of pop up, often effortlessly, like those random answers that seem to appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, like when you've been trying to remember something and then it suddenly hits you while you're in the shower or doing something completely different.
Exactly, that's a thought. Now, thinking is what we do with those thoughts. It's the analyzing, the judging, the creating stories, and often, as Nguyen points out, the generating of negative emotions from those thoughts.
So it's not the thoughts themselves that are the problem, but how we choose to engage with them.
That's the key. To illustrate this, he uses a thought experiment about dream income. So imagine for a moment, what would your ideal income be?
Okay, got it. Let's say, a nice round number.
Perfect. Now, multiply that by 5.
Whoa, okay, done. But I have to admit, my mind immediately jumped to all the reasons why that's not possible. Like,
Yeah.
oh, that's way too much, or I could never earn that.
And that's exactly the point. That initial thought, the larger sum, it might have felt exciting at first, but then the thinking kicks in and brings with it doubts, limitations, and that not good enough feeling.
It's like our minds are wired to focus on the gap between where we are and where we want to be,
Yeah.
rather than just enjoying the possibility for a moment.
Exactly. And this is where Nguyen's distinction between thoughts and thinking gets really powerful. He even provides a chart in the book contrasting them across various attributes, like their source, their energy, their essence, and more. It's fascinating.
So you have thoughts, which are kind of like pure potential, and then you have thinking, which is what we layer on top of those thoughts, adding our own judgments and interpretations.
Precisely. And this all connects beautifully to a Zen story Nguyen shares about a young monk and an empty boat. Have you heard this one?
I don't think so, but I love a good Zen story. Lay it on us.
All right, so picture this. This young monk is meditating in his boat when another boat comes along and bumps into his emperor. At first, he stays calm, just like a good Zen monk. But then he realizes the other boat is empty and he gets furious.
Wait, really? He gets angry at an empty boat?
Yeah, he starts yelling and cursing at this empty boat as if someone were in it. Of course, later he realizes that his anger wasn't caused by the boat itself, but by his own reaction, his own thinking.
I see. It's a great illustration of how our suffering is often self-created. We get so caught up in our reactions that we lose sight of the fact that we have a choice in how we respond.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really fascinating idea that kind of challenges the whole concept of positive thinking. It's the idea that our natural state is actually one of well-being.
Hold on, are you saying we don't need to try to think positive to be happy?
That's exactly what Nguyen is suggesting. He argues that joy, love, and peace are our default states, simply obscured by our excessive thinking. To illustrate this, he guides readers through a thought experiment where they recall their most joyful memory.
I remember doing that exercise, and it was really eye-opening. In those moments of pure joy, I realized there weren't a lot of thoughts cluttering my mind. The feeling came first, not the other way around.
Exactly. And a lot of people find that's true, that their most joyful memories aren't filled with complex thoughts or analysis. It's just pure feeling.
It's like our natural state is actually happiness and peace, and it's our thinking that pulls us away from it.
I like that. And to help us understand this more deeply, Nguyen introduces a framework called the Three Principles, which were developed by Sydney Banks.
Okay, 3 principles, huh? What are they?
So the first principle is the universal mind, which you might think of as the intelligence or energy that flows through all of life, the source of everything.
It's like the universal consciousness that connects us all.
Exactly. Then the second principle is consciousness, which is our individual awareness of both our existence and our thoughts. It's what allows us to experience the world.
So the universal mind is the source, and consciousness is like our individual window into that source.
I like that analogy. And then the third piece is thought, which is that raw material that comes from the universal mind and is experienced through our individual consciousness. It's the stuff we then mold and shape with our thinking.
So it's not that thoughts are bad, but it's what we do with them that can create suffering.
Precisely. And these three principles, universal mind, consciousness, and thought, they're constantly interacting to create our experience of reality.
It's like a dance between the universal, the personal, and the creative potential of thought. This is fascinating stuff. But, as we're talking about this idea of not overthinking, I have to ask, how do we navigate the world without thinking? I mean, don't we need to think to make decisions, plan, solve problems?
That's a great question, and it's something Nguyen addresses directly.
Mushin. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
So Mushin translates to no mind, but it's not about being mindless, right? It's more about accessing a state of heightened awareness and peak performance where the internal chatter of the mind is quiet.
So it's like being fully present and responsive in the moment without getting bogged down in overthinking.
Exactly. In martial arts, it allows for those instinctive, effortless actions. But Nguyen suggests that this concept applies to any field where peak performance is desired.
Interesting. So those times when we're in the zone, completely absorbed in what we're doing, maybe that's a state of mushin.
That's a great way to put it, and it really challenges this idea that constant mental effort is the key to success. Sometimes the best way to achieve our goals is to step out of our own way and allow intuition to guide us.
Okay, I'm with you so far. But if we're not supposed to overthink our goals, how do we even set goals in the first place? Does this mean we just become passive and give up on all ambition?
That's a common concern, but Nguyen clarifies that there's a big difference between goals driven by inspiration and those driven by desperation.
Ooh, I like that distinction. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about the goals you've set in the past. Where were they coming from? Were they coming from a place of lack or scarcity, a feeling of, I need this to be happy? Or were they arising from a sense of excitement and possibility, a feeling of being called to create something special, regardless of the outcome?
I've definitely experienced both. And it's true, the goals that come from that place of need always feel so heavy. Like I'm constantly striving, but never quite reaching a sense of satisfaction.
It's like you're always chasing something outside of yourself to fill a void.
Exactly. And those are often means goals, right? Like,
Yeah.
I need to achieve this in order to then feel happy or successful.
Yes. Whereas goals that are born from inspiration, they feel expansive and joyful, almost effortless. It's not about seeking something outside of yourself to feel complete, but about expressing your unique gifts and talents in a way that feels aligned with your true self.
It's like the difference between forcing a flower to bloom and allowing it to unfold naturally.
That's a beautiful way to put it. To help readers tap into those inspirational goals, Nguyen poses this question. If I had infinite money, already traveled the world, had no fear, and didn't receive any recognition for what I do, what would I do or what would I create?
Wow, that's a powerful question. It really strips away all the external motivations and forces you to connect with your core desires.
Right, and it highlights that we all have those inspirational thoughts within us. It's just about clearing away the layers of thinking that block them from emerging.
So it's like we're already wired for joy and fulfillment, but we've somehow learned to overthink our way out of it. What does all of this mean for how we experience love? Is there a connection between non-thinking and love?
Absolutely. And that leads us into the next fascinating thread that Nguyen unravels. He explores the profound connection between non-thinking and unconditional love, drawing on his own personal experiences.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. We'll have to dive into that after a quick break.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were just starting to touch on this idea of unconditional love and how it connects to non-thinking. It's a really powerful thread that runs through Nguyen's book, and he even shares a personal story that really brings this to life.
Oh, I love a good personal story. Tell me more.
So Nguyen talks about how his girlfriend said something really simple to him one day. It was just, I don't know why, I just love you. But it completely shifted his perspective on love.
Wow, that is simple, but I can see how it would be profound too. What was it about that statement that was so impactful for him?
It made him realize that her love was unconditional, not based on any specific actions or qualities he had to earn or maintain. It wasn't contingent on anything. He didn't have to do anything special to deserve it. It just was.
That's beautiful. And how did that contrast with his own view of love?
Well, he realized that he tended to overthink love, making lists in his head of all the reasons why he loved her. And he realized that by doing that, he was inadvertently placing conditions on his love. Like it had to meet certain criteria to be valid.
Right. It's like saying, I love you because. And as soon as you add that because, you're introducing a condition.
Exactly. And that's what he saw so clearly in his girlfriend's statement. Her love was just there, present, open, accepting without any need for justification or explanation.
It was just pure, unadulterated love. And that's what unconditional love really is.
Precisely. And what's so fascinating is that Nguyen then takes this concept of unconditional love and extends it to the creative process.
Oh, interesting. How does he make that connection?
He talks about the difference between conditional creation and unconditional creation. So conditional creation is when we're creating something with a specific outcome in mind. We're attached to the result, whether it's getting recognition, making money, or achieving some external goal.
Right. It's like we're creating with strings attached.
Exactly. And that can create a lot of stress and pressure. It can actually block the creative flow because we're so focused on the destination that we can't fully enjoy the journey.
Whereas with unconditional creation, it's about the pure joy of creating, just for the sake of it.
Exactly. There's no attachment to the outcome.
Yeah.
It's about expressing yourself fully, allowing the creative energy to flow through you without any conditions or expectations.
That sounds so liberating.
Yeah.
Like those times when you get lost in a creative project and hours go by without you even noticing. You're just completely immersed in the process.
Precisely. And that's the state that Nguyen is pointing to. And he suggests that this kind of unconditional creation, this flow state, is more readily available to us when we're not overthinking.
It's like our minds create these blocks, these barriers to our natural creativity and inspiration.
Right. And it's not about eliminating thinking altogether, but becoming aware of when it's helpful and when it's hindering us.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance between thinking and non-thinking, knowing when to engage the mind and when to let go and allow things to unfold.
I like that. Finding the sweet spot. Now, I know all of this sounds incredibly appealing in theory, but I'm sure some listeners are wondering about the practicalities here. How do we actually shift to this way of being? Are there any challenges we might encounter along the way?
Right. It can sound a little daunting, especially if you're used to living in your head, constantly analyzing and planning everything.
Absolutely. And Nguyen doesn't shy away from addressing this in the book. He acknowledges that for some people, feeling peaceful and content for extended periods can be unfamiliar. It can even be a little unsettling.
You know, it's funny. I've experienced that myself. Like, if things are too quiet, I start to think, wait a minute, shouldn't I be worrying about something? What am I missing?
Exactly. It's like we're so accustomed to the drama of our thoughts that silence can feel suspicious. And he also normalizes the doubts that might arise, especially around productivity. We live in a culture that glorifies busyness, so it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking that we need to be constantly doing to be successful.
Oh, yeah. That hustle culture mentality can be hard to break free from.
Absolutely. But Nguyen reminds us that true productivity often comes from a place of alignment and joy, not from forcing ourselves to constantly be on.
It's about working smarter, not harder, as they say.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of having faith during this transition, trusting that even though it feels unfamiliar, this peace and joy is our natural state, and that we're not going to suddenly become lazy or unproductive if we quiet the mental noise a bit.
It's like we have to trust that it's okay to let go of the reins a little bit and allow life to unfold.
I like that analogy, letting go of the reins. And he even offers some practical tips for navigating this shift, like creating a morning routine that fosters a sense of calm and centeredness.
Ooh, I love morning routines. It's like setting the tone for the day, right?
Exactly. Instead of starting your day by checking email or scrolling through social media, what if you started with a few minutes of meditation or some gentle stretches? It's about intentionally creating space for peace and presence before the busyness of the day takes over.
That's such a good reminder. It's so easy to just jump right into the whirlwind of the day and get swept away by it. But taking those few moments to center yourself can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. Now, in addition to that potential discomfort of feeling peaceful, Nguyen also points out a few other common challenges that people might encounter as they start to explore this path of non-thinking.
Okay, let's talk about those challenges. What are some of the things that people might bump up against?
Well, one of the big ones is the ego's attempt to regain control. Remember, the ego thrives on thinking, on analyzing and judging and comparing. So when we start to quiet the mental chatter, the ego can feel threatened.
Like it's losing its grip on things.
Exactly. And it might start to throw tantrums or try to pull you back into old patterns of overthinking. You might notice those voices popping up saying things like, see, this isn't working, or you need to be more in control.
It's like it's trying to convince you that you're doing something wrong by finding peace.
Exactly. But Nguyen's advice here is to simply recognize those thoughts and emotions for what they are. The ego's attempts to pull you back into familiar territory. He suggests we just observe them without judgment, letting them pass like clouds in the sky.
It's like learning to detach from the drama of our thoughts, to see them as temporary visitors, not permanent residents.
Yes, exactly. And another challenge he talks about is the fear of the unknown. That sense of, what if I let go of control and everything falls apart?
Oh, I know that feeling.
Oh,
It can be really scary to surrender to the unknown, especially when you're used to feeling like you have to have everything figured out.
it's a very understandable fear.
Yeah.
But Nguyen encourages us to see fear as a signpost, not a stop sign. It's often a signal that we're on the verge of a breakthrough, that we're stepping outside our comfort zone and into a realm of greater possibility.
So it's like fear is an indicator that we're on the right track, that we're moving towards something that's truly important to us.
Exactly. And he reminds us to have faith in our ability to navigate those fears, trusting that we have the inner resources to handle whatever arises.
It's like remembering that we've made it through every challenge we've faced so far, and we have the strength and resilience to face whatever comes next.
And that we're not alone in this.
Yeah.
There's a universal intelligence, a wisdom that's always available to us, guiding us and supporting us every step of the way.
It's like tapping into that inner GPS system that knows the best route, even when we don't.
Precisely. And this brings us to another really key aspect of non-thinking, trusting our intuition as a guide.
Okay, I'm ready to hear more about this. Intuition has always felt a little mysterious to me, like something that some people have and others don't.
It can definitely feel that way, especially in a culture that often prioritizes logic and reason over inner knowing. But Nguyen suggests that we all have this innate wisdom, this gut feeling that often whispers the best course of action.
It's like that little voice inside that says, this feels right, or go this way, even though you might not have a logical explanation for it.
Exactly. And he encourages us to start paying more attention to that voice, to trust those gut feelings, even when they go against conventional wisdom or our own preconceived notions.
It's like reclaiming our own inner authority, recognizing that we already hold the wisdom we seek within ourselves.
Yes. And he even debunks the myth that we need to have it all figured out. He reminds us that even geniuses, people like Einstein and Edison, they relied on inspiration and intuition to make their groundbreaking discoveries.
That's a great point. It takes the pressure off, doesn't it? Like, it's okay to not have all the answers. We can trust the unfolding of life and allow the solutions to emerge organically.
Exactly. And to help us tap into that intuitive guidance, he outlines a simple three-step process.
Okay, I love a good process. What are the steps?
So, step one is to simply recognize thinking as the source of negative emotions. It's about becoming aware of when that mental chatter is leading you down a rabbit hole of worry, doubt, or fear.
So step one is all about awareness, becoming the observer of our thoughts, recognizing them as separate from our true selves.
Exactly. Then, step two is to surrender control and have faith in your inner wisdom. It's about letting go of the need to overanalyze and trust that the answers will come, even if you don't know how or when.
It's about taking that leap of faith, trusting that something bigger than our limited minds is guiding us.
And then, step three is to lean into those positive feelings as they arise.
So it's about following the breadcrumbs of joy, trusting that they're leading you in the right direction.
Beautifully put. It's about aligning yourself with the frequency of peace, love, and joy, and allowing those feelings to inform your choices and guide your actions. And this brings to mind one of the stories Nguyen shares that really resonated with me. It's the one about the scholar and the overflowing teacup.
Oh, yes. That's a great one. It's such a powerful metaphor for how we need to empty ourselves of our preconceived notions to make space for new wisdom and insights to emerge.
Exactly. In the story, this scholar visits a Zen master seeking wisdom. The master pours tea into the scholar's cup, but keeps pouring, even after the cup is full, spilling tea everywhere. The scholar protests, but the master continues pouring until the scholar finally understands the lesson.
It's a great visual, isn't it? Like we're so full of our own ideas and beliefs that there's no room for anything new to enter.
And Nguyen connects this directly to non-thinking. He explains how quieting the mental chatter creates space for those aha moments to occur.
It's like giving our minds a chance to breathe, to let go of the struggle and allow for that natural flow of inspiration to take over.
And he reminds us that the truth is often simple, though not always easy to grasp. It's about trusting that the wisdom we seek is already within us, waiting to be revealed when we quiet the noise of our thinking.
This has been such a rich exploration of Nguyen's ideas. I feel like we've covered so much ground already. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this idea of creating space for miracles in our lives. It's something I've experienced personally, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think that's a perfect segue into the final part of our deep dive. We've explored a lot of the theoretical underpinnings of Nguyen's work, and now it's time to get even more practical and talk about how we can actually apply these principles in our daily lives and how that can open us up to experiencing more of those miracles you mentioned.
I love it. Let's take another quick break and then dive into that. Okay, we're back. And before the break, you mentioned getting more practical about this whole idea of creating space for miracles. So how do we actually do that? How do we make that shift from overthinking to a more open, receptive state where those miracles can occur?
It's interesting because Nguyen doesn't see miracles as these supernatural events, He sees them as a natural unfolding of life when we align ourselves with that frequency of peace, love, and joy.
Yeah, it's like when you finally let go of that tight grip on control and surrender to the flow of life, that's when the magic happens.
It really is. It's like you're getting out of your own way and allowing the universe to work its magic. And it reminds me of a time when I was facing a really tough decision. I had overanalyzed everything, weighed all the pros and cons, but I was still completely stuck.
Oh, I hate when that happens. What did you do?
Well, I finally just decided to let it go, to surrender, to the unknown. And it was amazing. Within a day, a series of seemingly random events occurred that led me to the perfect solution.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like the answer had been there all along,
Yeah.
but you needed to create the space for it to emerge.
Exactly. And Nguyen talks about this in the book, even sharing the story of Thomas Edison, the famous inventor. He would deliberately use sleep to access creative solutions.
Oh, yeah. Didn't he hold a steel ball in his hand while he was drifting off to sleep? So as he fell asleep, the ball would drop and wake him up.
Exactly. And he'd immediately write down any insights that had come to him in that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. It's a great example of how creating space, whether it's through sleep, meditation, spending time in nature, can allow our minds to tap into that deeper well of creativity.
It's like our conscious minds are only a small part of the equation. There's this whole vast reservoir of subconscious wisdom that we can access when we quiet the mental chatter.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of us have experienced this in different ways. Like you're struggling with a problem and then the solution just pops into your head while you're in the shower or going for a walk.
Oh, all the time. It's like the answer was there all along, but my mind was too cluttered to see it.
And Nguyen suggests that this applies to all areas of life, not just creative breakthroughs. Whether you're seeking guidance on a decision, trying to solve a problem, or just looking for a deeper sense of peace, the key is to create that space for the insights to emerge.
So it's not just about relaxing or taking breaks. It's about cultivating a mindset of receptivity, being open to new ideas and perspectives.
Exactly. And what I really appreciate about Nguyen's approach is that he doesn't just talk about the theory, he also offers practical advice for how to actually incorporate these principles into our daily lives.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of those practical tips?
Well, he emphasizes the importance of practices like meditation, mindfulness, spending time in nature. These are all great ways to create those pockets of stillness in our busy lives and reconnect with that inner wisdom.
Those are all fantastic suggestions. But I have to admit, sometimes my mind feels like a runaway train. Those negative thoughts just keep spinning and spinning. What about those times when it feels really hard to quiet the mind?
Well, Nguyen reminds us that it's not about eradicating thoughts altogether, but changing our relationship to them. He suggests that we can learn to view our thoughts as passing clouds in the sky of our awareness.
So instead of getting caught up in every thought that pops up, we can simply observe it and let it pass without judgment.
Exactly. It's like we're becoming the witness of our thoughts rather than the captive of them.
I like that, the witness, not the captive.
And he's big on self-compassion too. He knows that there will be times when we fall back into those old patterns of overthinking. The key is to simply notice it without self-criticism and gently guide ourselves back to that place of awareness and peace.
It's like we're learning to be a kind and patient observer of our own minds, recognizing that we're all works in
Right.
progress.
And one of my favorite quotes from the book really captures this. He says, "We're ever only one thought away from peace, love, and joy, which come from a state of non-thinking." It's a beautiful reminder that no matter how far we stray, we always have the power to choose a different thought, to shift our perspective and reconnect with our true nature.
And it's true. Sometimes all it takes is that one thought, that one shift in perspective to completely change how we feel.
Absolutely. And I think that's the ultimate message of Nguyen's work, It's about reclaiming our power, recognizing that we have the ability to create a life that is truly joyful, peaceful, and purposeful.
It's been such an insightful conversation. I feel like I have a whole new toolkit for navigating life's challenges and creating a more fulfilling experience.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you. And to our listeners, I encourage you to continue diving into these concepts and see how they resonate with your own experiences.
Great advice. Remember, trust your inner wisdom, embrace the journey, and know that you're always just one thought away from peace, love, and joy. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Don't Believe Everything You Think. We'll see you next time.